Before air conditioning, summer didn't just make people uncomfortable. It emptied cities and killed the ones who couldn't leave. For most of human history, hot months were a season of organized retreat. The ones who could fled. The ones who couldn't died. Every summer, the richest families in America simply left their cities. The Vanderbilts, the Astors, the Morgans, they did not endure July and August in Manhattan. They boarded trains. They filled steamers. They went to Newport, Rhode Island, where Cornelius Vanderbilt II finished building a summer cottage in 1895 that held 48 bedrooms and a great hall with a 50-foot ceiling. It was a single-purpose machine for not being in New York. The Breakers was never lived in during winter. It barely existed outside of summer. The Catskills grew for the same reason. A cheap train ride took middle-class families out of the asphalt and into the mountains, and the resorts followed the riders. By the turn of the century, the Adirondacks, once a wild region of 3,000 summer residents in 1869, hosted roughly 25,000 every year. The wealthy did not flee to escape discomfort. They fled because the city became unendurable, and only the ones with money could afford to be elsewhere. And it was not just private citizens. The United States Senate scheduled its entire calendar around escape. Members of Congress would try to adjourn before the heat overwhelmed the Capitol. And in one year, they left so early that the legislative session ended in July. Rarely again in the 20th century would Congress cut out that soon. The Speaker of the House, John Nance Garner, put it plainly. No good legislation comes out of Washington after June. This was the geometry of American life in the heat, baked in for generations. Cities emptied, the money left, the schedules bent. The Senate itself surrendered to the same force that drained a laborer on a brick sidewalk. Summer was not a season anyone endured. It was a season the country ran from. Then came August 1896. For 10 days, the temperature in New York City did not drop below 90. Nights offered no relief. The mercury held above 72, and for 3 nights straight, it stayed above 80. The brick walls of the tenements had soaked up the day's heat and radiated it back long after sunset. The air inside was thick, unmoving, and unlike anything a body could cool itself against. Across New York, Boston, Newark, and Chicago, somewhere around 1,500 people died. That number was larger than the combined death toll of the New York City draft riots and the Great Chicago Fire. It was, in raw arithmetic, the worst single catastrophe to hit those cities in living memory. And it was heat. Theodore Roosevelt was police commissioner at the time. He toured the bodies. He saw what the heat had done to the working class men in their 20s who bore the brunt, men who hauled, lifted, and dug through the day and lay down in rooms that never cooled. Jacob Riis had already been photographing the city's other half for years by then, and some of his most enduring images are not of poverty in winter, but of summer. Families, including small children, sleeping on iron fire escapes because the apartments inside were uninhabitable. He described the tenements as fiery furnaces. The fire escape was a fire safety device. It became a bedroom. The cruel arithmetic of the 1896 heatwave is that it did not touch the people whose names are still on the buildings. The Vanderbilts were not in New York. The Astors were not in New York. The Morgans were not in New York. The men and women who died in those 10 days were the ones who had nowhere else to go. Tenants, laborers, the poor, the old, the very young. Heat was a reaper, and it cut cleanly along the line of who could afford a train ticket. Surviving a city summer was a full-time job, and the entire structure of daily life was shaped around it. The President of the United States spent summers on a screened rooftop porch at the White House. William Howard Taft slept up there, in the air. When Woodrow Wilson needed to work in 1914, he moved his office into a tent at the end of the Rose Garden, because the Oval Office was unbearable. The leader of the country sat in a canvas tent in his own backyard to keep cool. A century of architecture had been engineered around the same problem. Houses were built with tall ceilings to lift hot air above the occupants. Transom windows above every door let air flow room to room. Double-loaded porches wrapped the second floor. Operable windows sat on opposite walls to catch a cross breeze. The orientation of a house, which way it faced, where the windows went, was dictated by the sun and the prevailing winds. A house built wrong baked its owners. Every southern shotgun, every dog trot, every sleeping porch was a piece of climate engineering disguised as architecture. The school calendar bent too. Urban schools once ran 11 months a year. By 1900, the 9-month calendar was firmly established. Not because of farm labor, the usual explanation, but because classrooms were unendurable in summer and attendance collapsed. Children stopped coming. The cities gave up and shut the schools. And there was ice. In the 1880s, ice harvesting had grown into one of the largest industries in the country. Workers cut blocks from frozen ponds in winter, packed them in sawdust, and shipped them south to be stored in oak-lined ice boxes that stood in pantries like small pieces of furniture. Ice was delivered to homes daily, like milk. The ice wagon was as ordinary as the milk wagon. The iceman was a familiar figure in every neighborhood. The icebox was the only thing keeping food from spoiling, and the block of ice inside it was purchased by the pound. None of this felt unusual. None of it felt like hardship. It was simply summer. You moved slowly. You slept where you could. You drank when there was water. You put the mattress on the porch. The whole season was organized around a force that is now, for most of us, a thermostat. The machine that ended all of this was invented in 1902, and it was not built to save anyone. In July of that year, a 25-year-old engineer named Willis Carrier was working at Buffalo Forge, a heating and ventilation company in upstate New York. He was handed a problem at a Brooklyn printing plant. Paper absorbed moisture from the summer air, swelled, and misaligned the color registration on multicolor press runs. Carrier designed a system that ran air over chilled coils to wring the humidity out of it. The cooling of the air was a side effect. He was solving a paper problem, not a human one. For the next decade, mechanical cooling was a factory tool. The first home to be fully air-conditioned was a Minneapolis mansion belonging to the son of barbed wire magnate John W. Gates, completed after his death in 1914. A few years later, a small movie theater in Montgomery, Alabama, became one of the first theaters to install the system. The breakthrough that made comfort cooling possible came in 1922, when Carrier unveiled a centrifugal chiller capable of cooling large spaces economically. 3 years later, the Rivoli Theater in Times Square became the first major movie palace to install the system, and its summer box office was up roughly $100,000 over the previous season. Cooled theaters made the summer blockbuster possible, because until then, attendance in the hot months had collapsed. But homes were a different story. Early room coolers were ruinously expensive and required condensing units that weighed hundreds of pounds, putting them out of reach for any but the wealthy. In 1947, the year the modern window unit finally became compact enough to install in a real home, 43,000 were sold. 6 years later, in 1953, 1 million sold. Mass residential air conditioning arrived in the United States roughly 50 years after the invention, and half a century after the heat wave that killed 1,500 people in 10 days. The machine that ended the summer was never built for human comfort. It was built to keep paper flat. By the time it reached the people who needed it most, those people had been dead for decades. New York in August is no longer a place people flee. Phoenix, Houston, Miami, Atlanta, cities that were once unlivable in summer, are now home to tens of millions of people, and the buildings there are sealed glass towers where the inside knows nothing of the outside. The Sun Belt exists because the machine on the wall made it possible. 6 of the 10 largest metropolitan areas in the country now sit in the heat that once emptied cities every July. Step into a car in a 100-degree day, and the air inside is 68 degrees in seconds. Walk into a building and the cold finds you. Sleep a full night in a closed room without a thought. The whole machinery of survival, the sleeping porches, the ice wagons, the transom windows, the rooms emptied for the season, is gone. The force that once decided who lived and who died is now a switch on the wall that no one thinks about. That is the part that should stay with you. People lived through this. They built their entire lives around it. They died of it, by the hundreds, by the thousands. And the architecture of the fight was so ordinary to them that no one wrote it down as hardship. It was simply summer. We have forgotten what it cost because we no longer have to pay. What did your grandparents do to survive a summer before the machine on the wall? Drop a line in the comments. The strangest answer usually wins. Subscribe to the Origin Portal if you want the next origin story told the way it actually happened.